In the heart of New York City, where luxury meets loneliness, a widowed CEO haunted by the memory of his late wife crosses paths with a kind-hearted waitress who looks eerily like the woman he lost. What begins as a strange request, "Be my date for one day," turns into a profound journey of healing, compassion, and rediscovered hope. This isn't a love story. It's a story about loss, memory, and the quiet power of human connection. A reminder that sometimes the people who enter our lives by chance are the ones who help us live again. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and share to spread hope. Subscribe for more stories that remind us kindness still exists. It was a rainy afternoon in New York City. The streets shimmered under the pale glow of streetlights as raindrops tapped rhythmically against windows. Inside a towering glass building, Daniel Walker, 39, CEO of a leading tech company, sat motionless at his desk, his gaze lost beyond the skyline. 3 long years had passed since his wife, Emily, had died in a tragic car accident. The world had moved on, but Daniel hadn't. He had all the success one could dream of, yet inside, he was a hollow man living on memories. A framed photo of Emily sat before him, her radiant smile frozen in time. Every time he looked at it, it felt like losing her all over again. That evening, something in him stirred, a quiet urge to step out, to breathe beyond his office walls. He left earlier than usual and walked through the drizzle toward a small cafe tucked on a familiar street corner. It was the same place he and Emily used to visit every Sunday after church. As he stepped inside, the warmth of roasted coffee beans and soft jazz music wrapped around him. Every detail, the scent, the laughter, the corner booth by the window, felt like stepping into the past. He sat down, heart heavy, his eyes wandering aimlessly over the menu he didn't intend to read. Then a gentle voice broke through his thoughts. "Good evening, sir. What can I get for you?" Daniel looked up and froze. The waitress standing before him bore an uncanny resemblance to Emily. The same hazel eyes, the same soft warmth in her smile. For a moment, Daniel forgot how to breathe. Her name tag read, Grace. His throat tightened as memories collided with the present. He finally managed to whisper, "Coffee. Black." Grace smiled kindly, unaware of the silent storm she had just stirred within him. He watched her walk away, her presence both comforting and painful. For the first time in years, Daniel's routine shattered. He couldn't explain it. Something about Grace pulled him back to life, even as it reopened wounds he thought had scarred over. The next day, he returned to the cafe. And the day after that. Grace would greet him with a genuine smile, always asking how his day had been. Her kindness was simple, uncalculated, and that made it powerful. Daniel began to look forward to those moments, the quiet conversations, the way her laughter seemed to echo Emily's in the faintest way. As the days passed, he found himself lingering longer after finishing his coffee. Grace, though younger, 27 maybe, carried a maturity born of struggle. He saw it in her eyes, the same kind of sadness that hides behind strength. Perhaps that's what drew him closer, 2 souls carrying invisible scars. One rainy night, near closing time, Daniel sat alone at his usual table, watching the reflections of city lights in his cup. Grace approached with concern. "You okay?" she asked softly. Her tone wasn't casual. It was genuine. Daniel forced a faint smile. "Rough day," he admitted. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him, wiping her hands on her apron. "We all have those," she said. There was something about her presence that quieted the noise in his mind. Then, after a long silence, Daniel looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grace, can I ask you something strange?" She tilted her head, curious but unafraid. "Sure," she replied. He took a deep breath, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "Tomorrow would have been my wedding anniversary," he said. "I don't have anyone to share it with anymore. Would you be my date? Just for one day?" Grace blinked, taken aback. "Your date?" she echoed, unsure if she heard him right. "Yes," he said quietly. "No expectations, no strings. I just want to feel like life still has warmth in it." His vulnerability was disarming. Grace hesitated for a moment, searching his eyes. Not for answers, but for truth. And what she saw there wasn't loneliness alone. It was honesty. Finally, she nodded gently. "All right," she said with a small smile. "Just one day." Daniel's eyes softened, relief washing over him like rain. For the first time in years, his heart felt light enough to dream. That night, he went home, and before turning off the lights, glanced once more at Emily's photo. "Maybe tomorrow," he whispered to her image, "I'll remember how to live again." And for the first time in 3 long years, he slept peacefully. ChatGPT said, the next evening, the rain had stopped, leaving New York glistening beneath the streetlights. Daniel stood outside the cafe, dressed in a dark navy suit, holding a bouquet of white lilies, Emily's favorite. When Grace stepped out, her simple blue dress swayed gently in the cool air. She looked nervous until Daniel smiled and said softly, "You look beautiful." The warmth in his tone eased her anxiety, and for the first time that day, she smiled. They went to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The city shimmered like a sea of lights, the wind carrying whispers of life below. For hours they talked, about pain, purpose, and beginnings. Grace told him about losing her mother, about juggling 2 jobs while studying nursing. Daniel listened intently, his heart heavy with empathy. It felt like he was seeing the world, again, not through wealth or status, but through connection. At one point, Grace gently asked, "Do you miss her?" Daniel's voice trembled. "Every day, but tonight, it feels like she's here, through you." Grace's eyes softened. "Maybe she sent me," she said quietly. He looked at her with tears glistening in his eyes. Maybe she did. The moment was still, sacred. 2 souls bound by loss, finding peace in one another's presence. After dinner, they walked through Central Park. The rain had left the paths shining beneath the lamplight, reflections of gold and silver rippling under their feet. They spoke little, letting the silence say what words couldn't. It wasn't love that filled the air, but understanding, the kind that heals more deeply than affection ever could. When they reached the cafe again, Daniel turned to her. "You've done more for me tonight than you realize," he said softly. "You reminded me that love doesn't end. It just changes." Grace smiled gently. "And you reminded me that kindness can heal more than words ever could." Before parting, Daniel reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small envelope. Grace opened it and froze. Inside was a check, enough to pay her tuition. "Daniel, I can't accept this," she said, her eyes wide. But he stopped her with a calm smile. "It's not payment," he said quietly. "It's gratitude." His sincerity left her speechless. For a moment, she could only whisper, "Thank you." Days later, when Grace returned to the cafe, Daniel was gone. The manager handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a note written in Daniel's neat handwriting. "You helped me remember who I was. Keep shining your light for others." "Daniel." She held it to her chest, tears forming as she whispered, "Thank you." Months passed. Grace finished nursing school and began working at a hospital in Brooklyn. Her compassion became her greatest strength. Every patient she touched felt her warmth. Meanwhile, Daniel found his purpose again. He launched the Emily Hope Project, a charity helping widows and single parents rebuild their lives. It was more than a foundation. It was his way of turning pain into purpose. One morning, Grace received an email from the Emily Hope Project. Her eyes widened as she read the sender's name, Daniel Walker. He invited her to join as a project coordinator. When they met again, it felt like time folded back on itself. "I told you to keep shining," Daniel said with a warm smile. Grace laughed through tears. "And you helped me believe I could." Years later, they stood together at a grand charity gala. The hall sparkled with golden light, filled with laughter and hope. Daniel looked around at the families their project had helped and said quietly, "You gave me back my purpose, Grace." She met his gaze, eyes soft and full of gratitude. "And you gave me faith that second chances are real." They stood side by side, no longer broken, just beautifully rebuilt. Around them, life moved with light and laughter. Love hadn't returned as romance. It had come back as something deeper, compassion, renewal, peace. As the evening ended, Daniel looked out the window at the starlit skyline and whispered, "Thank you, Emily." And somewhere deep in his heart, he knew she had sent Grace, not to replace her, but to remind him that love never truly leaves. It simply changes shape and finds its way back through kindness.